On the bridge of the colossal ship Astralis, Ambassador Zayner expected the usual reaction. Instead, the answer came in less than one astrocycle. Please leave our system. If you don't leave, we will consider your presence hostile. A colossal ship appeared on the edge of Charon's star system without any warning. It was 4 times larger than any ship ever built by the Adept race. Its shiny Orionium hull shone in the distant starlight. Unusual runes covered its surface, and force fields flickered around like streams of energy. Ambassador Zayner stood on the bridge of the ship Astralis, watching the third planet from the star through the main visor. This was his 58th first contact mission. He had done this so many times that he could predict how it would go. A primitive species will be scared at first. Then he will be amazed by the galactic conclave's technology. And finally, they will beg to join the interstellar community and receive the gifts of an advanced civilization. Begin standard first contact protocol, Zayner ordered his team. The diplomat from the Drain race was tall and slender, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. His kind joined the galactic conclave over 900 years ago. Since then, they have become the best negotiators of the conclave. The communications officer, the reptilian Zyron, hissed softly as he activated the translation systems. We're broadcasting on all frequencies, Ambassador. Messages are sent in their dominant languages. The message was simple and had worked on every world for the past 1,000 years. It spoke of peace, friendship, and the wonderful possibilities that awaited the primitive species that joined the conclave. It promised technologies that would solve all their problems and protect them from the dangers of space. Zayner had expected the usual reaction. At first, there is a confused uproar, while the leaders of the planet are trying to understand what is happening. Then there is fear when they realize that they are not alone in the universe. Finally, desperate attempts to establish a connection and show their friendliness. Instead, the answer came in less than one astrocycle. It was broadcast on a clear, strong signal, which reached Astralis without any technical problems. The voice was calm and professional, speaking in a language that the translator identified as galactic, one of the main languages of the planet. This is Admiral Eris Vane of the Aegis United Defense Forces. We have received your message. Thank you for the offer, but we have to decline. Please leave our system within 50 astrocycles. If you don't leave, we will consider your presence hostile. There was silence on the bridge. Zayner's front arms hung limply at his sides as he stared at the comm display. In 58 first contact missions, nothing like this has ever happened. They are. Did they just tell us to leave? What is it? Asked the weapons officer, a young Drain named Sliss. Play the message again, Zayner ordered. They listened to Admiral Wayne's words 3 more times. The message was the same every time. The Adepts politely but firmly rejected the conclave's offer and ordered them to leave. It doesn't make sense, said Dr. Kaller, the mission's xenobiologist. The insectoid Kieran clicked his mandibles in confusion. According to our scans, they have barely reached the level of Civilization 0.6. They have not mastered the light transitions. Their technology is primitive. They should be grateful for our offer. Zayner had spent 3 centuries studying primitive species. He knew the patterns. When the young civilization first met the conclave, they went through predictable stages. At first, there was shock and disbelief, then amazement at the technology and knowledge that the conclave offered. Finally, full acceptance of the conclave's protection and leadership. But these adepts missed it all. They acted as if meeting aliens was normal. They showed no surprise at the sight of the conclave's advanced ship. The most shocking thing was that they seemed completely uninterested in what the conclave had to offer them. Maybe they didn't understand, the science officer suggested. Their translation technology is primitive. Maybe they think we're threatening them. No, Zayner said slowly. They understood perfectly. They called me Admiral and talked about defensive forces. They have a military structure, and they perceive this situation as a military one. The communications officer looked up from his station. Ambassador, we are receiving another transmission. Turn it on. The voice was different this time. He was older, with a slight accent that the translator couldn't identify. This is General Malchus of the Aegis United Defense Forces. We know that you are still in our system. This is your 22-hour warning. Leave now, or we will take measures to remove you. Zayner felt a chill run through his body. In 1,000 years of first contact missions, no primitive species has ever threatened the conclave. They had neither the technology nor the power to make such threats meaningful. Sir, the sensor officer called. I'm detecting unusual activity throughout their system. Many objects are moving in the asteroid belt. The energy output from their planetary installations has increased. Show me. The main screen changed to show Karen's star system. Red dots appeared as sensors detected the ships and stations of the Adepts. There were a lot more of them than the Conclave had expected. The Adepts have built an extensive network of bases throughout their system. How could we have missed all this? Zayner demanded an explanation. The objects were hidden, sir. They seem to be using advanced masking technology. Our sensors detected them only when they started moving. Advanced technology for masking a species that supposedly could not make light transitions. Zayner's confidence began to falter. Perhaps we should send a diplomatic shuttle to their planet, Dr. Kaller suggested. Direct communication will help them understand the benefits of joining the Conclave. Before Zayner could respond, sirens began to wail throughout the ship. The tactical display lit up with warnings when sensors detected a multitude of objects approaching at high speed. Ships are approaching, the weapons officer reported. 13 ships are approaching from different vectors. They seem to be using some form of disguise that we can't completely break through. Impossible, Zayner said. Our sensors can detect any known technology in the galaxy. The main screen showed the approaching ships of the Adepts. They were smaller than the Astrolese, but they moved with precision and speed. Their hulls seemed to refract light, making them difficult to aim at. They're taking up combat positions around our ship, the tactical officer reported. All weapon systems are aimed at us. Admiral Wayne's voice came through the communications system again. Conclave ship, you are surrounded. You have 15 astrocycles to leave our system. This is not a negotiation. Zayner stared at the tactical display. Somehow, in less than one astrocycle, these primitive Adepts had managed to surround his advanced Conclave ship with vessels that should not have existed. How? He whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. The ship's computer began to output data collected by passive scans of the Adepts' ships. The information was disturbing. The Adept ships used a combination of technologies that should have taken centuries to develop. Their disguise systems were more advanced than anything in the Conclave database. Their movement patterns indicated that they had been practicing space combat for years. Most worryingly, the ships showed signs of modification and improvement, suggesting that the Adepts were preparing for just such a situation. They were not surprised by the first contact. They were ready for it. Ambassador, the communications officer said softly. The Adepts broadcast on a frequency that we use only for military communications. They know our protocols. Zayner felt the first real fear he had felt in decades. These Adepts were not primitive. They were not grateful for the Conclave's offer. They were prepared, organized, and dangerous, and they wanted the Conclave to leave. For the first time in his long career, Ambassador Zayner did not know what to do next. The standard first contact procedures have completely failed. The adherents rejected diplomacy even before it could begin. He looked at the tactical display, where the 13 Adept ships maintained their threatening positions around his vessel. Their message was clear. Leave, or you will face the consequences. But the Conclave had never before retreated from the primitive world. Zayner knew that he would have to make a decision that could change everything. Ambassador Zayner sat in his private quarters aboard the Astrolese, looking at the data files scattered across his desk. For the past 8 astrocycles, he has been trying to figure out what went wrong with the first contact mission. Nothing in his experience or training had prepared him for the reaction of the Adepts. A soft chime announced a visitor. Dr. Kaller walked in, his insect-like features showing clear signs of stress. The xenobiologist has been working nonstop ever since the Adepts issued their ultimatum. Ambassador, I've finished my analysis of the Adept civilization, he said, sitting down in the chair reserved for his kind. The results are alarming. How alarming are they? Dr. Kaller activated a holographic display that showed Karen and his surroundings. According to our initial scans, the Adepts seemed to be a typical level 0.6 civilization. They had atomic fission technology, basic space travel, and simple orbital installations. Nothing suggested that they could challenge the Conclave. The display zoomed in, showing the network of Adept bases and ships that had been discovered during the confrontation. But these attitudes point to a much more advanced civilization. The masking technology alone should have taken them centuries to develop. Zayner leaned forward. Could we have been mistaken in their level of development? I thought so at first, but the evidence does not support this theory. The display changed, showing detailed scans of the Adepts' technologies. Their basic infrastructure is exactly what we would expect from a primitive species. In their cities, chemical fuels are used for transportation. Their energy production mainly comes from burning ancient resources and simple reactors. Then how do you explain their advanced military technology? Dr. Caller's mandibles clicked nervously. I believe that they have been preparing for this meeting for a very long time, perhaps for decades. They seem to have focused all their cutting-edge research on military applications, while their civilian technology intentionally remained primitive. The consequences hit Zayner like a physical blow. You mean they knew we were coming? Not specifically, but they knew that someone like us would eventually come. Look at this. The display showed the historical records of the Adepts that the Astralese systems had intercepted from their communications networks. Their popular culture is filled with stories of alien contact. But unlike most primitive species, their stories rarely show aliens as benevolent. Zayner studied the data. The entertainment of the Adepts was full of stories about alien invasions, about species that pretended to be friends while planning a conquest, and about civilizations that enslaved primitive worlds. This was completely different from the hopeful first contact scenarios found in most young civilizations. They don't trust us, he said softly. Worse, they actively distrust anyone who claims peace while demonstrating overwhelming military superiority. Dr. Kaller brought up new files on the screen. I found records of their own history. This species has never known true peace. They have constantly waged wars throughout their documented history. The data was sobering. The Adepts fought in wars with weapons that ranged from simple tools to neutron bombs capable of destroying their entire planet. They have survived plagues, natural disasters, and conflicts that would have wiped out most species. Through all this, they never gave up their independence. No wonder they rejected our offer, Zayner said. From their point of view, we should look exactly like the conquerors in their stories. A new bell announced the arrival of another visitor. Commander Vlas, the ship's military advisor, came in with urgent news. Ambassador, we have a problem. The fleet of Adepts has been reinforced. The holographic display changed, showing the current tactical situation. Instead of 13 ships, there were now more than 32 Adept ships surrounding the Astralese. More arrived with each astrocycle. Where do they come from? Zayner demanded an explanation. Everywhere. Hidden bases throughout their system are being activated and ships are being dispatched. Some seem to have been built inside asteroids. Others were disguised as space debris. Commander Vlas singled out the new arrivals. Sir, their operational security is impressive. We did not detect any of these installations during our initial scan. Dr. Kaller studied the new data. This level of training suggests that they have been planning contact with aliens for at least 60 years, possibly longer. 60 years old. Zayner could hardly believe it. Most primitive species took decades to simply accept the existence of aliens. These Adepts had spent half a century preparing to fight them. That's not all, Commander Vlas continued. We intercepted some of their military communications. They don't just react to our presence. They have detailed plans for different scenarios. They call it First Contact Protocol Number 7. Do they have multiple First Contact protocols? Yes, sir. From what we can determine, Protocol Number 7 is intended for advanced civilizations that declare peaceful intentions while demonstrating military superiority. They have different protocols for different types of contact with aliens. Zayner felt a chill. What are the other protocols for? We are not sure, but the numbers go up to 16. Protocol Number 16 seems to be designed for total war against technologically superior enemies. The bridge crew worked in tense silence as the consequences became clear. The Adepts not only rejected the Conclave's offer, they had been preparing for this rejection for decades. They were planning a war against enemies with more advanced technology. Sir, the communications officer called. We are receiving another transmission from the Admiral of the Adepts. Turn it on. Admiral Wayne's voice was as calm as before. Conclave ship, you have 5 astrocycles left to leave our system. We strongly advise you not to test our resolve. Open the channel, Zayner ordered. This is Ambassador Zayner from the Galactic Conclave. Admiral Wayne, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. We came in peace, offering friendship and cutting-edge technology. Why do you reject these gifts? The answer came quickly. Ambassador, we have studied your methods. We know how your conclave operates. You arrive on primitive worlds offering gifts. Those who agree become addicted to your technology. Over time, they lose their ability to control themselves. They become vassal states of your empire. Zayner's front arms tensed. The Adepts somehow found out about the Conclave's integration process. They knew that the species that accepted the Conclave's protection were gradually losing their independence. "This is not a conquest," he said. "This is a guide. Young civilizations need help to develop properly." "We disagree. We've seen what happens to the species that accept your help. They stop growing. They stop learning. They become pets in the galactic zoo." The accuracy of the Adepts' assessment was shocking. Admiral Wayne described the Conclave's methods with perfect clarity. Somehow, these supposedly primitive Adepts understood galactic politics better than most members of the Conclave. "How do you know about our methods?" Zayner asked. "We've been listening. Your communications are not as secure as you think. We have been following the Conclave broadcasts for 40 years. 40 years old. The Adepts have been spying on the Conclave for 4 decades. They learned about the galactic government, studied its methods, and prepared their response. It was not a primitive species reacting in fear. It was a calculated decision made by people who understood exactly what they were rejecting. Admiral, you certainly understand the advantages of joining the interstellar community. We offer technologies that can solve your problems, medical advances that can eliminate diseases, energy systems that will put an end to shortages. At the cost of our freedom. No thanks." The connection was interrupted. Zayner stared at the display showing the fleet of Adepts. More and more ships continued to arrive, taking up positions around the Astrolese. The Adepts did not retreat. "Ambassador," Dr. Kaller said softly. "What are we going to do now? The standard protocols have completely failed." Zayner looked at the tactical display. 32 ships of Adepts surrounded his ship, and more arrived. These were not primitive creatures that could be easily impressed or intimidated. It was a military force that had been preparing for this meeting for decades. For the first time in his long career, Ambassador Zayner encountered a species that not only understood the Conclave's proposal, but also decided to reject it. They preferred independence to security, freedom to protection. The question now was whether the Conclave would accept this choice, or whether this would be the first war between the Conclave and a primitive species in over 1,000 years. Then Kar High Admiral received an emergency transmission while he was reviewing the deployment of the fleet on the Outer Rim. Military Commander Varian has served the Galactic Conclave for over 250 years, and during that time he has never received such a report. Has the primitive species rejected the Conclave's integration and is holding Ambassador Zayner hostage? His voice was a deep rumble that made his assistant nervously step back. "Yes, sir. The Adepts have surrounded the Astrolese with more than 45 ships and are demanding that our diplomatic mission leave their system." Nkar's massive body shifted as he studied the tactical reports. The Varians were one of the founding species of the Conclave, and their military might has maintained peace in the galaxy for centuries. No primitive world has ever dared to challenge the authority of the Conclave. 45 ships. How is this possible? According to reports, this species is barely capable of interplanetary flights. The intelligence was wrong, sir. The Adepts seem to have been hiding their true military potential for decades. Nkar activated the holographic display in his command center. The data from Astrolese painted a picture that contradicted everything the Conclave knew about primitive civilizations. Not only did these Adepts reject the Conclave's offer, they had been preparing for this rejection for years. "Assemble the third punitive fleet," he ordered. 14 ships will be more than enough to handle this situation. "Sir, maybe we should try another diplomatic contact first." Nkar's eyes, each the size of an Adept's head, focused on his assistant with disapproval. "Diplomacy has failed. These primitives must learn that the authority of the Conclave cannot be challenged. We will teach them the same lesson that we taught the Xerian rebels 55 years ago. The third punitive fleet was designed specifically for this type of situation. 14 heavily armed Conclave ships capable of destroying any primitive civilization. The fleet was successfully used against rebellious vassal states and aggressive species that refused to accept reasonable arguments. While the fleet was preparing to jump into the Karen system, Nkar received another update from Ambassador Zayner. The Adepts broadcast their story directly to Astrolese, apparently wanting the Conclave to understand who they were dealing with. Nkar looked at the historical records with growing confusion. The civilization of the Adepts was built on conflict. Their entire development has been shaped by constant wars. They fought with weapons that started as simple clubs and eventually turned into neutron bombs capable of destroying their own planet. The most disturbing thing was that they had been through it all. Every war, every catastrophe, Every cataclysm made them stronger, not destroyed. They were unlike any other species the Conclave had encountered. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the Third Fleet is ready to jump." "Do it." 14 ships of the Third Punitive Fleet disappeared in flashes of blue light. Their FTL thrusters carried them to the Charon system. The NCAA expected that the situation would be resolved within a few astrocycles. No primitive species could stand up to the Conclave's military technology. The fleet arrived at the edge of the Charon system and immediately encountered something unexpected. Instead of the 45 ships previously reported, there were now more than 70 Adept ships present. They were reinforced again. "Admiral Wayne," a familiar voice said over the comm system. "I am the Supreme Admiral of the Nkar of the Galactic Conclave's Third Fleet. You will immediately release our diplomatic vessel and surrender to be treated as hostile primitives." The answer came from another voice of the Adept. "This is General Anita Smith, Supreme Commander of the Charon Defense Force." "Hello, Admiral. Your diplomatic vessel is free to leave at any moment. We don't keep them. We just make sure that they understand our position. Your position doesn't matter. Primitive species do not dictate terms to the Galactic Conclave. We are not primitive and do not dictate conditions. We are protecting our territory from unwanted invasion." Nkar studied the tactical display. The Adepts' ships were located throughout the system in seemingly defensive formations, but something was wrong with their positioning. It looked too organized, too thoughtful. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the Adept fleet uses movement patterns that I don't recognize. They don't follow the standard doctrine of space combat because they are primitive. They don't know how to fight properly in space." But even as he said this, Nkar felt doubts creeping in. The formations of the Adepts looked wrong because they were not based on the military theory of the Conclave. They seemed to be based on something completely different. "All ships prepare for police action. We will disable several of their ships to demonstrate the superiority of the Conclave. Aim only at their weapon systems." The Third Fleet moved forward, loading their weapons. The Conclave's doctrine for dealing with primitive species was simple: demonstrate overwhelming superiority, crush resistance, and then accept surrender. This has worked on every world for thousands of years. The reaction of the Adepts was immediate and shocking. Instead of trying to directly fight the approaching Conclave ships, the Adepts' ships scattered throughout the system. But they didn't back down. They moved to predetermined positions with precision that involved careful planning. "Sir, we are discovering new contacts." Multiple objects are launched from hidden positions throughout the system. The tactical display lit up with warnings. Hundreds of objects accelerated toward the Conclave fleet from asteroids, moons, and what appeared to be empty space. The Adepts not only hid the ships, they hid the weapon platforms throughout their system. "Kinetic projectiles," the weapons officer reported. "Sir, they're shooting solid metal objects at high speed. No energy signatures, just mass and velocity." Nkar has never faced this type of war. The Conclave ships relied on energy shields to protect them from energy weapons and missiles. But these projectiles were just pieces of metal moving at an incredible speed. They were simple, primitive, and devastatingly effective. The first hit sent shockwaves through the entire Conclave fleet. Kinetic projectiles penetrated the energy shields as if they didn't exist. 3 Conclave ships suffered serious damage before they could adjust their defenses. How do they accelerate projectiles to such speeds? Nkar demanded an explanation. "Unknown, sir. The Adepts seem to have built massive accelerators throughout their system. They use magnetic fields to launch metal projectiles at speeds approaching 8% of the speed of light. 8% of the speed of light. The Adepts used their own star system as a weapon. They turned asteroids into gun platforms and moons into fortresses. It was not a primitive technology. This was engineering on a scale the Conclave had never seen from a young race." "Sir, the Adept ships are not engaging in direct combat. They use hit-and-run tactics, coordinating their actions with established weapon platforms." Nkar watched as the Adepts' ships darted between the asteroids, using cover to attack his fleet. They moved as if they had been practicing these maneuvers for years. Every ship of the Adepts knew exactly where to go and what to do. "They've turned their entire system into a fortress," he said softly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The Adepts weren't just preparing for contact with the aliens. They were preparing for an alien invasion. They have spent decades, perhaps generations, to transform their solar system into the most protected space in the galaxy. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the commander of the Adepts." General Smith's voice was calm and professional. "The High Admiral, now you have tested our defensive capabilities. We don't want to destroy your ships, but we will if necessary. Withdraw your fleet, and we'll let you leave unharmed." Nkar stared at the tactical display. His 14 ships were powerful enough to destroy most civilizations, but they faced an enemy that was prepared for this particular battle. The Adepts weren't trying to win with superior technology. They won thanks to their excellent preparation and strategy. "Sir, what are your orders?" For the first time in his military career, the Supreme Admiral of the Nkar faced defeat at the hands of a supposedly primitive species. The Adepts didn't just reject the authority of the Conclave. They have proven that they can defend this refusal by force. "Signal the fleet to retreat to a safe distance," he ordered. "I must report this to the Conclave immediately." As the third punitive fleet retreated, Nkar realized that everything the Conclave believed about primitive species was wrong. The Adepts were not primitive. They were something the galaxy had never seen before. A young civilization that refused to be civilized by anyone else. The question now was what the Conclave would do about it. For the first time in 1,000 years, they encountered a species that could not be intimidated, could not be subdued, and refused to be integrated. The Adepts changed everything. The Galactic Conclave Grand Assembly Hall has seen many crises in its 1,000-year history, but nothing like this. Representatives of more than 350 species filled the huge chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of anxiety, confusion, and anger. The Supreme Chancellor of the Vkan called for order with a ceremonial staff that has been passed down from generation to generation. The ancient leader of the Terrians led the conclave through wars, plague, and economic collapses. But a primitive species successfully defending itself against the conclave's forces was an unprecedented event. "The emergency meeting begins," Khan announced, his telepathic voice reaching every mind in the room. Supreme Admiral Nkar will present his report on the situation in the Karen system. The massive military commander Varian stood in the center of the hall, his imposing presence riveting the attention. But for the first time in his career, Nkar looked uncertain. "Honorable representatives, the situation with the appearance of the Adepts is unlike anything in our records. The Third Punitive Fleet encountered organized resistance, which forced us to retreat." Shocked whispers filled the hall. The representative of Alter Prime, a slender reptilian creature, rose to speak. "Supreme Admiral, are you saying that 14 ships of the Conclave were defeated by primitive vessels?" "Not defeated," Nkar corrected. "But we couldn't complete our mission. The Adepts had prepared defensive systems throughout their star system, making the usual pacification impossible." The Centrian delegate, her crystalline form pulsing with excitement, projected her thoughts into the assembly. "How is this possible? Our intelligence report stated that they were barely capable of interplanetary flights." Ambassador Zayner left his seat in the diplomatic section. "Honorable representatives, I believe that our intelligence was intentionally incomplete. The Adepts only allowed us to see what they wanted us to see." "Explain," ordered Chancellor of Khan. "The Adepts have been monitoring our communications for decades. They know our integration procedures, our military doctrines, and our technological capabilities. They use this knowledge to prepare countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize our advantages." Dr. Kaller activated the holographic display that showed the Karen star system. "The Adepts have created what can only be described as a fortress system. They have hidden weapons platforms throughout their territory, disguised military installations as civilian infrastructure, and developed technologies specifically designed to counter our own." The representative of Kexer from the Illyrian Confederation stood up, his insect-like features expressing obvious skepticism. "Are you suggesting that a primitive species has outsmarted the entire intelligence apparatus of the Conclave?" "He didn't outsmart me," Zayner replied. "They just approached the problem differently than we expected. While we assumed that they would be grateful for the contact, they assumed that we would be conquerors." Angry discussions began in the hall. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others called for a complete overhaul of first contact procedures. The chaos continued until Chancellor of Khan restored order. "What do the Adepts want?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, the communication system in the hall was activated. Admiral Eris Vane appeared on the main display, standing on what appeared to be the bridge of an Adept warship. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Conclave," she began. Her words were translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "I'm Admiral Wayne of the Aegis Combined Defense Force. I am broadcasting this message to inform you about the position of the Adepts. There was silence in the hall. No primitive species has ever addressed the conclave directly without permission. We know that you are discussing what to do with us. We know that some of you want to force us to join your organization. We want you to understand why we cannot and will not accept your offer. Admiral Wayne gestured, and images of the worlds that make up the conclave appeared on the display. You offer protection and technology to young civilizations. Instead, these civilizations are gradually losing their independence. They become dependent on the support and guidance of the conclave. Eventually, they lose their ability to control themselves. The accuracy of her assessment shocked the assembly. She described the integration process with perfect clarity. We have studied 20 different species that have joined the conclave over the last century. They all followed the same pattern. At first, they accepted the conclave's protection. Then they adopted conclave technology. Finally, they accepted the authority of the conclave in all matters. Detailed recordings of these species appeared on the display, including information that should have been classified. The Adepts somehow obtained the internal documents of the conclave. We do not dispute that this process has brought peace to the galaxy, but it is peace through surrender. This is stability through stagnation. Every species that joins the conclave stops growing, stops exploring, stops becoming something more than it was. Representative after representative looked uncomfortable as Admiral Wayne continued her analysis. She wasn't just rejecting the conclave's offer. She criticized the entire galactic order. The Adepts choose a different path. We choose independence over security. We choose growth over stability. We choose freedom over protection. Chancellor Khan activated his communication system. Admiral Wayne, you understand, of course, that one species cannot stand up to the entire interstellar community. Your resistance is admirable, but ultimately futile. Maybe, Vane replied. But we're not standing alone anymore. The display changed, showing communication logs from all over the galaxy. Messages flowed between the member worlds, bearing news of the Adepts' successful resistance to the authority of the conclave. The story of our refusal has spread to every world in the conclave. For the first time in centuries, other species are wondering if membership in the conclave is truly voluntary. It was the Clave's worst nightmare. The entire galactic order was based on the voluntary acceptance of the authority of the conclave. If the member species started to believe that they could resist, the whole system would collapse. Several species have already contacted us, Admiral Vane continued. They want to know how we've prepared for your arrival. They want to know if resistance is possible. The representative of Vexter from the Riel Alliance stood up, his amphibious features flushed with anger. This is unacceptable. The Adepts are encouraging rebellion across the galaxy. We don't encourage anything, Vane replied calmly. We are just proving that there are alternatives, that species can choose their own path instead of accepting the path you offer them. And what is this path? Chancellor Khan asked. Isolation, conflict, war? Growth, exploration, a chance to become something the galaxy has never seen before. Admiral Wayne's image tilted forward. Your conclave brought peace, but it also brought stagnation. When was the last time a member species made a major technological breakthrough? When was the last time someone explored territories outside the borders of the conclave? When was the last time someone tried to do something really new? The questions hung in the air like accusations. The truth was that the conclave did bring stability, but at the cost of innovation and research. The member species focused on maintaining their position within the interstellar community rather than expanding the boundaries. We're offering something different to the galaxy, Vane continued. We offer the possibility of independent development so that species work together as equals and not as subjects and protectors. You're suggesting chaos, said the Kexer representative. We offer a choice. The broadcast ended, leaving the audience in stunned silence. The Adepts didn't just reject the authority of the conclave. They challenged the entire philosophical foundation of interstellar civilization. Chancellor Khan looked around the hall where representatives from hundreds of worlds were sitting. For thousands of years, the conclave has maintained peace through unity and control. Now one primitive species was questioning whether this world was worth the price. We have to make a decision, he said softly. Will we accept the choice of the Adepts and risk the collapse of our entire system, or will we use all the necessary force to maintain galactic order? This question will determine not only the fate of the Adepts, but also the future of every species in the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the conclave was faced with a choice that could change everything. 6 months after Karen's failed pacification, the galaxy was changing in ways the Conclave could never have imagined. What began as a simple first contact mission turned into a crisis that threatened the very foundation of interstellar civilization. Supreme Chancellor of Khan stood in front of a huge porthole in his private chambers, watching the stars that represented the hundreds of worlds of the Conclave. Reports from all over the galaxy told the same story. For the first time in centuries, member species questioned their relationship with the Conclave. Ambassador Zayner entered the room with the latest intelligence reports. The diplomat, Drain, looked tired and older than his age should have made him. The situation continues to deteriorate, he reported. 20 member species have officially requested information about the Adept resistance. The three began withdrawing their ships from the Conclave's joint operations. And the Adepts, they have created what they call the Alliance of Independent Worlds. 15 species have already joined them, and every day they express more and more interest. Khan turned away from the porthole. Did 15 species leave the Conclave? Not completely. They retain their membership, but have declared their right to independent action. They follow the model of the Adepts, cooperation without subordination. The Chancellor's ancient mind had a hard time accepting this development. For thousands of years, membership in the Conclave has meant accepting the authority of the Conclave in all matters. The idea of partial membership, the cooperation of species while maintaining independence, was completely alien to the galactic order. What does the Supreme Admiral of the Nkar recommend? Military operations. He wants to assemble a grand fleet and force all the rebellious worlds to submit, starting with Karen. Khan was dreading this moment. The Grand Fleet represented the combined military power of the entire Conclave. It has never been used against member worlds, only against external threats. Using it now would mean abandoning any pretense that membership in the Conclave is voluntary. And what is Admiral Wayne's reaction to our military buildup? Zayner activated a holographic display showing the current situation in the Karen system. What appeared on the screen made the Chancellor's blood run cold. The Adept star system was now bristling with defensive installations that dwarfed anything they had displayed 6 months ago. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every planet and large asteroid. The asteroid belt itself has been transformed into an interconnected network of weapons and production facilities. They weren't idle, Zayner reported. The engineering capabilities of the Adepts seem to have no practical limits. They have built defensive systems that, according to our analysts, can destroy the Grand Fleet. It's impossible. No single system can withstand the combined might of 350 worlds. Maybe, but the Adepts are no longer one system. The display zoomed out, showing neighboring star systems. They've contacted isolated colonies and independent traders. Several Adept research fleets have embarked on systems outside of Conclave space. Khan stared at the display with growing alarm. Adepts don't just defend their native system. They are expanding, creating a network of independent worlds beyond the control of the Conclave. He whispered, "They're building an empire." No, Zayner corrected. They're building something completely different. An alliance of equals. Each world maintains its independence by contributing to mutual defense and development. Before Khan could respond, his communication system activated with an alarm. Admiral Wayne's image appeared, but she wasn't alone. There were dozens of species behind her, including several that the Chancellor recognized as members of the Conclave. Supreme Chancellor of the Khan, Vane began. I am addressing you on behalf of the Alliance of Independent Worlds. We understand that the Conclave is preparing military action against our worlds. Admiral Wayne, the Conclave cannot allow the galactic order to collapse into chaos. Your rebellion threatens the peace that we have maintained for thousands of years. What we are threatening is stagnation. What we offer is growth. Vane gestured to the representatives behind her. These species have chosen independence instead of security. They chose to risk the unknown instead of accepting eternal dependence. And what happens when you face threats that you cannot handle alone? What happens when species with different values come into conflict? The Conclave exists to prevent wars, not to encourage them. Wars happen because species have no choice but to submit or fight. We propose a third option, cooperation between equals. Vane activated her own display, showing the structure of the Alliance of Independent Worlds. Each member retains full sovereignty. Decisions are made by consensus, not by authority. No one species can impose its will on another. Khan studied the Alliance's structure with growing concern. It was everything the Conclave was not, decentralized, voluntary, and based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control. It's chaos, he said. Without a central authority, your alliance will collapse into warring factions within a few years. Perhaps, but we'd rather fail as free beings than succeed as subjects. The Chancellor felt the weight of 1,000 years of interstellar history pressing down on him. The conclave system has brought unprecedented peace and stability to the galaxy, but it has also brought stagnation, dependence, and the gradual loss of each species' unique identity. What do you want from us? He asked. Recognition, acceptance that species have the right to choose their own path, ending the forced integration of primitive worlds. Vane's image tilted forward. We are not your enemies, Chancellor. We simply refuse to be your subjects. And if we refuse, the display changed, showing military formations throughout the Alliance space. Each member world was heavily defended, their ships positioned in coordinated defensive patterns. More troubling were the technological innovations visible in their designs. The Alliance ships demonstrated modifications and improvements that suggested rapid technological development. Then you'll be facing the first interstellar war in 1,000 years, Vane replied. But it won't be a war of conquest. This is going to be a war of independence, and we've been preparing for this possibility since the day we first discovered your ships. Khan stared at the tactical display with growing horror. The Alliance might be outnumbered, but they've been preparing for this conflict all their existence. They have developed their technology, their tactics, and their entire civilization around the concept of fighting a superior enemy. You can't defeat the entire conclave, he said. We don't need to win. We only need to survive long enough for other species to see that resistance is possible. Vane's expression was calm but determined. Every battle we fight, every ship we destroy, every world we successfully defend proves that the conclave is not invincible. The truth of her words hit Khan like a physical blow. The Alliance did not need to defeat the conclave militarily. They only needed to exist long enough to inspire other species to join them. Every day they survived weakened the authority of the conclave across the galaxy. What alternative do you propose? He asked. Coexistence. The conclave continues to rule its member worlds as it always has, but it recognizes the right of species to choose independence. No more forced integration. No more punishment for worlds that refuse to join the conclave. It was a radical proposal that would fundamentally change the nature of interstellar civilization. For the first time in history, major powers will appear in the galaxy that do not obey the authority of the conclave. A door opened behind Khan to admit Supreme Admiral Nkar and several other military commanders. Varian's expression was grim. Chancellor, the Grand Fleet is ready. Give the order, and we'll end this rebellion within a few months. Khan looked from the military leaders to the image of Admiral Vane. One path led to war, destruction, and the eventual collapse of everything the conclave had built. The other path led to a galaxy where the conclave was no longer the supreme authority, where species could choose their own destinies. Admiral Vane, he said slowly, if we agree to your terms, how will we know that your alliance will not become a threat to the peaceful worlds of the conclave? Because we're not like that. We are looking for independence, not conquest. We want to grow and explore, not rule others. Vane's voice was firm and sincere. We're offering you proof. We will freely share our technological developments with any species, member of the conclave or not. We will defend any world that asks for help, regardless of its political affiliation. We will be partners, not masters. Khan closed his ancient eyes and made a decision that would change galactic history forever. The conclave recognizes the alliance of independent worlds as a sovereign entity. We agree to coexistence and mutual respect between our governments. Supreme Admiral Nkar's roar of protest shook the hall, but Khan ignored it. The era of the absolute authority of the conclave is over. The era of galactic diversity was beginning. Admiral Wayne smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Thank you, Chancellor. The Adepts look forward to a future where all species can choose their own path among the stars. When the broadcast ended, Khan realized that the Adepts had done something wonderful. They didn't just defend their independence. They have changed the way the entire galaxy sees what is possible. For the first time in a millennium, the future was truly unknown. And maybe he thought that was exactly what the galaxy needed.